Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the River Volta podcast. I'm Ian Cannon, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Callum Wilson.
Hey, I'm Callum.
Hey, if you're new to the River Volta podcast, as all of you should be because this is episode 2, we're a new student-run initiative operating in association with the MFA in Writing and English department at the University of Saskatchewan. We're closely related to the River Volta reading series, which we also run, and are using this period of COVID-induced online engagement as an opportunity to form more discussion-based readings and reach authors we otherwise wouldn't have been able to reach with in-person events. On our very first episode, Callum and I read from our own writing, while Delane and Aliza interviewed and facilitated a discussion based on that writing. On this episode, we're switching places, and Delane and Aliza will be reading their own work, while Callum and I play the hosts. After this episode, once you know a bit more about the four of us, the host of this podcast, will be having guests on the show, which will include writers from all across Canada. But before we get to the reading, we'd like to acknowledge our presence on Territory 6 territory, the traditional territory of the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nation and Métis ancestors of the Cree people and reaffirm our relationship with one another. That being said, let's get to the first reading. Callum, who do we have up first?
Up first, we have Delane Just. Delane is a current graduate student in the MFA in Writing program at the University of Saskatchewan. She has been awarded a SSHRC grant for her thesis project, which is a collection of short stories relating to Canadian women and the LGBTQ plus millennial experience. She also works as the graduate editor-in-chief of the University of Saskatchewan Undergraduate Research Journal, in which her own article, The Womb's Burden, will soon be published. Today, she will be reading her visceral and introspective short story, Overripe.
All right, thank you so much for having me and for switching roles with Aliza and I for this week's podcast episode. So, as Callum said, I'll be reading my short fiction, Overripe. So, I guess we'll just get started. Hey, Kate, pass me the inventory list. In Sam's arms, a large box clinked as the wine bottles inside knocked around. I folded the papers in half and threw them to her like a paper airplane. Oh, come on, she said as the papers flew apart from each other midair. I snorted and gathered them, handed them to her as she set the box down behind the counter. The sliding doors of Dave's Liquor Emporium opened and closed. The customer, a middle-aged box-blonde woman, waddled in with the stank of white wine and ammonia. Too familiar. I slapped the skin on my left bicep lightly, leaned on the till, pressed the button to open the register, shut it, then pressed the button again. You're in a mood, said Sam. She grabbed the letter opener out of the cash register. The customer was teetering around the back shelves where we kept the cheap stuff. She had these gray leggings on that were pilled all over, and her hair was a nest of yesterday's curls. When she moved, her spine became a backward C, as if her center of balance was way back in her ass. Her legs stuck forward like walking sticks, nostalgic. Watching her gave me that same feeling I get when I see the red Mike and Ikes that come in those 25-cent machines. The kind that as a kid I stuffed into my mouth, handful after handful, bored while my mom begged the car salesman for a deal. The same kind that ended up back outside my body in a giant red clumpy jelly mess on the showroom floor. Didn't get a lot of sleep, I said to Sam and slapped my left bicep a few more times. This tattoo fucking itches. It was my first one. I thought you just went in, got the tattoo, and that was that. But now a pig-shaped scab was forming along the black lines of the inkwork. My mom loved pigs. She would arrange the little glass pigs we'd gift her for Christmas around the jacuzzi tub in the master bedroom. A little pig farm or something. Party? Asked Sam. The box made a loud cardboard scraping sound as she sliced through the tape on the sides. Right, like I'm the kind of person who gets wasted on a Sunday night, I said. Sam shrugged. She pulled out the bottles one after another and set them beside her, lined up like bowling pins. Trouble sleeping? She asked. Yeah, that was one way of putting it. More like nightmares all night. Waking up once, twice, thrice to my Saskatoon apartment, confused, crying, thinking I was back in Regina, 14 years old, and still sleeping on the bottom bunk in my bedroom. The upper bunk had been filled with all the gilt-stuffed pig-shaped plushies my mother bought me over the years. My stepfather dumped them in the trash when he moved out, yelling something about how he couldn't take it anymore. "Drink yourself to death for all I care." At the back of the store, the box blonde struggled to open the wine fridge. Her hands gripped the handle and it lurched open, causing her to stumble. She teetered on one leg while the other swung around in front of her to try to keep her balanced. God, my arm fucking itched. "Want to try some?" Sam had pulled out one of the whites from the box and screwed the cork up until it squeaked open with a wet pop. Box blonde was still wandering around, now with the plastic handle of a box wine in one hand. The doors slid open as another customer walked in, a young-looking, lanky man with his hat pulled over his eyes and jeans that dragged on the floor. "Dave will have your ass if he finds out," I said to Sam. "You expect me to make it through a 12-hour shift without it? The cameras in here don't work anyway." She sat down on the floor behind the register, cross-legged, and gulped it back from the bottle like it was a beer and not a liter of wine. She held it out to me. "It's pretty good, bit fruity." Nah, I can't stand wine. Hate the smell of it. You might be thinking, well, Kate, why would you take a job at a liquor store if you hate the smell of wine and makes you want to puke up your stomach acid? Yeah, I ask myself the same question. You try finding a job in this city that pays a uni student more than $12 an hour. Box Blonde was teetering towards the cash now, one foot after another like she was walking on a tightrope. I lost sight of the other customer somewhere between the towering intersection of gins and liquors. The clock on my phone said 2:35 p.m. I could take my break any minute now. I looked to Sam. She had stashed the open wine bottle in the empty space beneath the till, and was looking like she was getting ready to stand up. My arm felt like little beetle feet were crawling all over it. I just wanted to scratch it so bad, just drive my nail under the scab and peel it right off. "Hey, Sam." I stopped. I stopped because the box wine woman was standing at the till, swaying, the box on the counter, its price tag smiling at me with its little lines of thin black and white teeth. I didn't want to look at her, so I sucked in a long gulp of ripe, piss-smelling air and lifted the scanner to the tag, waiting for the little red flash of light and beep of release. I didn't want to talk to her, but, customer service. So I flashed a smile down at the counter and said, "Put your fucking hands up." Okay, that wasn't me. My eyes snapped up to the barrel of a small silver pistol. The young man was behind the box wine woman at the till, gun over her shoulder, pointed at me. The gun swayed up and down in his hand like traffic poles in the prairie wind, glinting fluorescent ceiling lights into my eyes. Guns were a bit less shiny than I expected. I raised my hand slowly and glanced down at Sam. She was hidden behind the counter, below the gunman's sight, frozen, one knee up like she was blasted with ice in the middle of standing. I watch a lot of true crime, podcasts, YouTube, docuseries, you name it. And they always say that witnesses are so unreliable and that they always seem to forget exactly what the perpetrator looks like the moment they disappear. And I always wondered, how do you forget something like that? How do you forget to look at the person who's literally trying to kill you? Like, you saw them right there, right in front of you. But you didn't even look? Can't even give a basic sketch to an artist? I was sure that, given the opportunity, I wouldn't fuck up like that. I'd get my attacker caught, jailed, cuffed. But standing here now, I realize that past me was a pretentious dumbass. Because I didn't look at him. I didn't look at the man holding the gun to my face, spitting orders into my eyes, or even the gun itself directed between my ribs, bobbing up and down as I slowly pushed the cash button and pulled out wad after wad of cash. No. I found myself staring at the box blonde whose shoulder was just below the barrel while my arm prickled and itched. Her face was all washed out, a round ghost face. Round glasses that shrunk her hazel eyes and jowls that made her lips look sunken and slim. Limp curls stuck to her forehead and tangled around her neck. Curls like I remember seeing strewn out on the couch. The bump of the bag of wine under the square crochet blanket. The apple core on the side table. Old and long forgotten. The fruit flies hovering, buoyant, around slow glazing eyes that slid up as the front door closed behind me, sucking out the air in the room. A low fog of human sweat and stink and the sickly smell of rotting grapes and a sinking, twisting feeling in my stomach like I might throw up. She looked like my mother. Oh, but she was long dead. 4 years now? 5? Liver failure. Yeah, sad story, I know. So right, we were standing there, a face-off. She stared at me, and I stared at her probably like I'd seen a ghost. 'Cause really, I felt like I had. And the gunman with his gun bobbing and his hat pulled down and his jeans dragging and his face a beige blur. Did he have pimples? I think I might remember pimples. And then the cash was stuffed in this black backpack, and with his gun still pointed, he walked backwards, knocking down a pyramid of Pilsner and the accompanying poster board, and slipped out between the automatic doors that slid open and closed right on time like an accomplice. I let my hands fall, felt my heart restart, let my lungs take in some air, felt the store fall back into place around me. The box blonde was shaking, quivering, both palms on the counter, and I thought then that she really didn't look much like my mother at all. The blonde was too orange, the eyebrows were too thin, the crook of her nose didn't quite reach the same height or point. And there was the smell, or the lack thereof, of that perfume my mom had always worn, a syrupy floral that became an overpowering, nauseating scent when mixed with booze and human skin. I took a step back and promptly puked between my feet. And Sam seemed to think this was funny, or maybe she was just hysterical because she just started laughing and laughing, cupping her mouth in her hands and just losing it. So I laughed too. At the horror of it all, at the way the little gun bobbed and bobbled, at the cans that didn't fall and now looked like some sort of weird abstract art, at the way the woman in front of us was staring, stunned, sober, and mortified. The rest was as you would expect. Company protocol, police questioning, racking my brain for any suspect identifiers, scars, tattoos, speech patterns, mannerisms. And I tried to focus, but my brain was floating around in my skull, and I couldn't stop giggling. I wondered if I had gotten more sleep if this wouldn't have all happened. Yeah, like that had anything to do with it. But anyway, after the police were through, reporters swarmed the place as they do in smaller cities like mine, trying to get their teeth on whatever little nuggets we'd let them take a hold of. It aired on the news a couple nights later. And there she was. Not mom, box wine, box blonde, slurring out sentences about how frightened she was and how it might have been a sign from God. And there I was, right after, saying something about how I worked there part-time. I would probably quit the next day, with my dark hair, blue eyes, but also the nose I had been looking for, the round face, the thin lips. The TV clicked off, but I was still there, colorless, but reflected in shadows. And I felt sick, and my arm itched and itched and itched, but there was no scab left to peel.
Thank you. That was actually so good.
Thank
and it
you.
was really nice to hear it out loud. For some reason, right after you started reading, my brain just did this thing where it thought it was a recording because it was just like so solid.
Thank you. I
There's
practiced
Yeah,
earlier.
I was gonna say you do no just or ends or just smooth, which is really nice. I think you have
Thank you.
a career in doing audiobooks.
I used to be so scared of reading my work out loud, so thank you.
Yeah. And then so this is obviously set in Saskatoon, which we are in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And even there's small things like the liquor store, and I was just wondering when you write a story, how much of it bleeds in from your real life, And just like even small things, not just like the actual story, but even apartments or like familiar places.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Um, with this piece too, it was one of the pieces that I first really like tried to incorporate like little figments of like my own life and also my own location into it. Setting is something I've had trouble with in the past, probably because I've lived in Saskatchewan my whole life, and I always felt like I didn't want to write about Saskatchewan. I wanted to write about somewhere else, but it is like the place I know best. So lately, I've been trying to be a little bit more open to using like real places that I know in like my writing. So yeah, the liquor store is like wasn't really based on anything in particular, but there are like little details that are definitely from like my own life kind of sprinkled in there. Like my mom actually did have like a ton of little glass figs always by like the tub growing up. That was like always the thing that we like associated with her, I suppose. I also do have a tattoo of a pig, though I would say like a lot of Kate's personality isn't necessarily based on myself, and like she's like her and her situation is a little bit more fabricated, while some of her backstory is like little bits implemented from some of my own past and my own experiences. Um, but yeah, I've been kind of trying to incorporate things that are real in a fictitious way more recently.
Yeah, I do that a lot with apartments for some reason. Like I don't like thinking of an apartment, so I always pull from like other apartments that I've seen or been in.
hmm
Um, I apparently have no imagination for apartments.
My
So
apartments are always like it's always this one apartment, but it's like a random like apartment in my brain. Like you used to say apartment and I just have like an image and it's not an apartment I've ever been in. It's just like an apartment that just always comes up in my brain.
so you just have like a box apartment that like a stock image.
Yeah, for most locations I have stock like locations.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wonder if that so like I've only been writing for 6 years. I'm not sure how Delane, how long you've been writing seriously at least.
Seriously?
But I wonder if stock images start to build up in your brain over time. Like say over 30 years, you just have like a warehouse full of stock images.
For me, I feel like well, I mean, I wrote a lot during high school, which like late high school is when I started taking it a bit more seriously, but was still kind of scared to like actually like take the nosedive into like thinking of it like as like a career option. Um, but I think when I would just read all the time, I would from reading and like I would create the stock images. And when I was in high school, I would read like fan fiction for like fantasy series and like other things, like TV shows that I liked. And so in a lot of those, they don't go into a lot of like deep descriptions because of the nature of like I think sometimes the people writing them. And so I think I just accumulated these like stock like apartment that I would just in my brain make up because I was like, it's not just an empty room, like it's an apartment, and I would just kind of create those, and they
Right.
bleed over into the things I write.
Yeah, there is a really good like how to write descriptions. Is that you really just do really simple descriptions, but
hmm
you allow the person to fill in their own stock image, and it's actually much stronger than you trying to tell them what their stock image should be. You kind of like go
hmm
like almost like only do like a 10% or like one distinguishing factor, and then their brain will just fill in the blank of what their stock image is.
hmm
Yeah.
I think I remember like Stephen King mentioning that in On Writing, his book. That might have been where you came across it as well. I know you're familiar
Maybe.
with that one.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember, but does he talk about? Because it's actually something that's been in my head for a while, but I'm not sure where it came from. So this might be it. But does he talk about like a hat, the trucker's hat?
No, no, I
There's
don't think so. Maybe I don't remember.
there's one that's a trucker's hat, and then it's just from a trucker's hat, you get an image of a man
hmm
wear a trucker's hat, and it doesn't
Yeah,
have.
that's probably um like tip number one for any podcast listeners who are newbie writers who want some description tips, like definitely like picking like a couple little key features can definitely highlight an entire person or room.
Yeah, like the box blonde.
Yeah.
Box blonde. And was that box blonde? Is that like from a box blonde?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like store, like you buy it
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
grocery store, like on your way out, kind of
Yeah.
like the $20, like, yeah, hair dye.
That's almost, I would say, almost like a female version of the trucker hat.
Yeah, kind of a
Yeah,
similar
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Like, like when you think of box dye, you think of like a certain type of like
Yeah, there's almost
persona.
like a emotional weight to it or something that comes along with someone who does a box wine or box
Mm,
both actually,
both.
box blonde. I did find though when I was reading it that you have a really interesting voice, and it's obviously Kate's voice, but something that just kept coming up, and I think it also came up when we did it for the workshop was who is Kate talking to? Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting because, like, I remember one of our fellow cohort members said that she thought that Kate was talking to like police interrogators, which I actually didn't even think about. For me, it was more like Kate's like talking to an audience, almost breaking the fourth wall, but at the same time, it's almost like an audience that's incredibly personal, like writing in your own diary or like a journal entry. So it's kind of like playing with like the meta narrative idea of like there is a reader, but at the same time she's disclosing these things that are like she probably wouldn't necessarily tell just anyone. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like it's supposed to be like a little bit tongue in cheek. Like in like the who is she talking to? Is she talking to you or is she just talking to someone?
Right. Yeah, I could almost see her like the like over or like in like a 90s like high school movie kind of thing where she's just you can hear the voice over the film.
Hmm.
Yeah, or like because it almost reminds me of because of that where it's put your fucking hands up and then okay that wasn't me. I could see that
Yeah.
stop frame and there's a voiceover. And it's like
Yeah.
okay that wasn't me. Like or almost like the you might be wondering how I got here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which it was funny that that came up in our workshop too because like um for me it was like that definitely was like partly the intention of like doing it, but like at the same time it was because I wanted to add almost like a satirical like funny element to the fact that like these really like crazy like the fact that they're being robbed in the first place is a very traumatic moment, but also she's like reliving some aspects of trauma from her past at the same time. Um,
My take on it was that it just you took the like emotional weight out of that moment
yeah.
because it wasn't the point of the story really. The point was more the relationship with the mother.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I actually wasn't even gonna have the robbery at first, and then I was like, no, I gotta have something going on. And so I just added in the robbery, and I was like, okay, that's kind of funny.
I think it works well. I think that was a good choice.
Thank you.
I did notice you changed the title.
Yeah.
I personally have like a really hard time with titles. I almost always do
Hmm.
like a short sentence for some reason.
I like those kind of titles too.
But
Um,
what was your process with changing it to overripe?
yeah, the
Or
first title was "Put your fucking hands up," the quote that the robber says. Um, which I was never fully set on. It was more like I just wanted something provocative, like as the title. Um, and when I came to Overripe, it was after a lot of like thinking hard about what it could be. Um, I was thinking about, okay, what are some of the key things in the story? There's a lot of alcohol. Okay, mostly wine. And then I was like, what, okay, what kind of wine stuff? One of my friend's suggestions was grape juice to be the title. But it just wasn't hitting the right mood fully for me. Um, and then I had past ripe for a bit, but I chose overripe because of the way it also hints towards overdue, something being past ripe. Um, and also the connotation of like I talked a lot about like ripe smells and like but also like ripe feelings, so I feel like ripe was just like the right word.
I like it. Do you have a list? Like do you have a titles document? It's like
Sometimes I'll
ongoing.
do that, but like some usually I'll like with either like my partner or like a friend who like has read this story, I'll just be like, okay, what about this? Okay, what about this? And then like there are usually like a lot of really bad ideas, and then every once in a while she'll go, mm, like my friend will be like, maybe that one sticks, or like my partner will he'll be like rethink that one, that one. Like I'll be set on it, but he's like, no, that's bad.
I had an idea for it, but if you gave it to someone without a title and then asked them to come up with one after they read it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like if you're giving it to your partner anyway, give it to them without a title and see what they think of.
That's true. Though my partner, like, I don't think he could come up with one.
Oh,
Maybe like one of
is
my
he
writer
listening right now?
friends. No, he's in a different room. But just in case.
Yeah.
Don't want to yell it and then he'll hear me and be like, I could.
And then you had said it. You had a prompt for this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I c-
Do you
let
remember
me
what the exact prompt was?
let me try to pull it up actually. It's from Prism Magazine, which is a it's like a Canadian magazine, but it accepts internationally as well. Um, we'll include
We'll give him
the
a shout out.
link down below.
Yeah. Hopefully, nudge
Yeah.
him a little bit.
So it was for a themed issue call out, which the deadline was the day we're recording this, actually, November 30th. And the prompt was scab, the word scab, and then it says, not quite broken, not quite mended, a reminder of what was and what will be. Scabs protect our wounds, and yet the temptation to pick at them and peel at them is always there. They call attention to what's already disappearing, and we don't yet know if they will leave a scar. Scabs are a reminder that healing can be a long, ugly process. And then underneath that, kind of for what type of work they're looking for, they said work that sits in between, neither cleaved nor bound, neither broken or whole. So that's kind of that's the mood as well as theme that I use when creating the piece.
So you had that prompt, and then what was going through your mind next? Like how did it develop into that story?
How did it develop?
This is what me and Callum were talking about, where sometimes like you just get like an image and the image sticks, and then somehow it grows from that
Yeah,
image.
I think the start was that I was like, okay, I want to bring up something about um like the mom figure, but like kind of because how I feel about some of my own like past is that like now I'm at a point where it's like it's kind of gone, but then unexpected things will remind you of that thing. Um, and oftentimes those kind of things will come in the form of either like seeing someone who looks familiar. And that happens to me a lot actually. Which is actually the inspiration for the end was because one time, like now that I'm getting older, like too, like I noticed like my face is starting to look more like my mother's face, and so I was like that can be like kind of shocking if you don't have a great relationship with like whoever you look more like. So that was also the inspiration for the end there. But I didn't want it to be like the whole focus of the piece. Like I wasn't writing a memoir and not all of the things in the piece are true, and that's kind of freeing for those elements. So I wanted there to be something else happening at the same time as this was happening. Um, and my friend had told me about not a bank robbery, but it was an incident at one of the libraries that happened. So like relatively recently, not a huge incident, but just an incident with um a customer who was a little bit like violent. So that kind of made me think like, okay, those things just sometimes just happen out of the blue, and then also reminders of your past will happen out of the blue. So I kind of just took like, how do I put together a shocking moment with also like a shocking feeling, but they're completely unrelated, kind of.
Yeah, I think it really gives it that punch, which I like.
Thank you.
And it's not the focus, which I like as well. It's just like a
Hmm.
little flavoring, seasoning.
Little spice.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we'll move on to Eliza. And Eliza's reading. Is Callum, are you still there?
Yeah, I am still there, and I did have I did have a question
Sure.
for Delane. Delane, you mentioned in class that this narrative voice that you've taken for this story is a relatively new addition to your bag of tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to us sort of, I guess, how you settled on that very close and jocular kind of narrative voice?
Yeah. Um, the reason I said that was partially because up until like probably 2 years ago, I never wrote in first person. I didn't like first person for a long time. I always wanted to read third person, and I wrote almost only in third person. But around 2 years ago, I took a class with Guy Vanderhey, offered at the University of Saskatchewan through the STM College, which I believe some of our fellow cohort members will be taking in the winter term. And he quite likes first person. I think it's he said it's like the way he put it was something like when writing, the form itself gives you the ability to give so much interiority into someone's head compared to other mediums. Why aren't you going to use it? Or like, why not use it? So, because of that, I tried out a short story in his course, which was all in first person with like a really specific voice of it was a guy who felt like the world was against him and was kind of like angry and grumpy. Um, and that one ended up working out quite well. So recently, in like the last 2 years, I've been working more on trying out like first person narratives and like using it more than just like a first person to tell the story, but like getting their specific voice to tell the story.
I do find that first person is harder. I think
It
that's,
can be.
yeah.
But at the same time, once you get the voice down, it's so much easier. I don't know, like, because they tell you the story themselves.
Yeah, I think that's why it's harder. It's because every first person has a unique voice. Whereas like third
Yeah.
person, you can kind of create your voice more. Whereas like
Hmm.
first person, I think wraps up your voice with the character's voice.
Yeah.
So it's like a little more layered.
Kate was probably easier for me because she's inspired of like more of like a past like high school angsty me who like is just like angry at the world a little bit, which isn't really like I'm not really that person anymore, and like I'm not fully Kate either in any way. But it came a little bit from like that one emotional place, and I was like, okay, like this is now a character separate of myself.
All right, Callum, do you want to give Eliza's introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Up next, we have Aliza Prodaniuk. She is a graduate student in the MFA program at the University of Saskatchewan, like Delane, Ian, and myself. Her writing has been published in various businesses, science, and travel magazines and journals, with her most recent work appearing in the Canadian Journal for Medical Laboratory Sciences. Aliza co-organizes the Caring and Connecting Pen Pal initiative, a letter-writing project that connects community volunteers with seniors in long-term care facilities. The project, which has been covered by CTV and CBC News, aims to mitigate the social isolation felt by seniors during the COVID-19 pandemic. And she'll be reading three pieces of flash fiction for us. Reflections, the Tuesday train to Union Station, and the nicest compliment, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for reading as well, Delane. It was, I think we could all agree, a pleasure to be able to hear you read that story again for us. So as Callum said, I'm going to be reading three pieces of flash fiction for you today, starting with Reflections. Hair up, hair down, tuck in shirt, untuck shirt, phone, left pocket, no, right pocket, scratch head, don't scratch too much, wipe nose, hair up, hair down, unclench your fists, damn it, walk straight, stop sniffing. Kurt stalks into the Starbucks, analyzing the people sitting in various positions about the room. It irritates him that nobody seems to have noticed his entrance. Bastards. He wipes his nose with his left hand while his right hand scratches at his scalp. The top of his head feels hot, and he finds it difficult to steady the pendulum sway of his body, back and forth, back and forth. A thickening white beard tickles his lower lip as it trembles. When did that grow? He sniffs and scratches, scanning the room until he finally locks onto her eyes. How dare she accuse me of this? I'll show her. His bony body transforms as he puffs his chest and rights his slumped shoulders to reveal the monster he has become. He stalks in her direction and looms over her seated figure. See, see, he shouts with excitement. His fists pump the air around him. Kurt sniffs and wipes. She sniffs and wipes, the tears streaming down her cheeks. You wanted me to prove that I am not high. Well, here I am. He turns and leaves the Starbucks the way he came, pounding the walls in his retreat. He does not hear what she has to say, nor does he see everyone look up from their books and iPhones to wonder at the commotion. Anger? Disappointment? He doesn't care what he read in her eyes. Hair up, hair down, tuck in shirt, untuck shirt, phone left pocket, no right pocket. Scratch head, don't scratch too much, wipe nose, blood. He pulls a used tissue from his back pocket and looks through the window of the Starbucks, absently dabbing at the rings of his nostrils. For a moment, their eyes meet through the glass before he focuses entirely on his reflection, the reds of his eyes burning back. He makes a face at himself. Fuck you. The second piece I'll be reading is called Tuesday Train to Union Station. An invasive male voice flooded the train car. Are you going to Union Station? Boomed the voice to an unknown recipient. I think I'm getting off here, first time, came an answer. I hate going to Union. You're in for a treat. It's insane. Where are you coming from? Hamilton. I went to see my daughter. That's wonderful. Did you have a nice visit? Oh, I didn't get to see her, of course. Oh? She never shows up, her mother. She's like that. But I go anyway, every time. Overhearing this bit of conversation, my right ear felt itchy, as it always does when I'm about to cry. Whatever slightly erotic scene that was about to take place in my Harlequin, Seduce Me Cowboy, could wait. I dog-eared the page and slid into the aisle seat, craning my neck over the side of the seat. Anyways, it's all water under the bridge. I went to a bar this afternoon and got drunk, said the man. I scanned the car. Do you work? Asked the other voice. The train pulled into Union Station. An overweight man, covered in tattoos, with a long red beard, backwards capped, and sunnies, got up from the seat near the front of the car, pulling his pants up just enough so that his butt crack poked out the top of his underwear. No, man. I plan to spend all day tomorrow getting high. It's about time they legalized pot. I caught myself, pained by the sudden urge to roll my eyes, my prior sympathies dissipating. I grabbed my book and headed towards the doors at the back of the car, embarrassed by the appearance of thoughts I thought I had unlearned. The train doors opened and I watched as the man was devoured by the ravenous crowd of well-dressed but tired-looking commuters that fought their way into the car behind us. The last piece I'm going to read is called The Best Compliment. The door of Cafe Orang Hai dings as I step outside, latte in hand. I pull the collar of my horrendously overpriced beige Aritzia camel coat up against the rain and head down the sidewalk towards my office complex. I sidestep to avoid a puddle, accidentally hitting shoulders with a man clad in a similarly overly expensive-looking jacket. A few droplets of latte jump from my cup and land on the cuff of my jacket. I stumble backwards into a puddle, dirty water splashing up the back of my black stilettos and pants. Watch it, he snarls, pushing past me. I pull a napkin from my pocket and begin dabbing at the coffee which has already seeped into the fibers of my coat. Sigh. I look around at the business formal outfits strutting up and down the street, looking for sympathy. My internal voice screams, "Someone notice me." Ah! Stupid! Oh my god! Fuck! 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 I spin around. A man in a ripped coat with sores spread across his face stalks up behind me, screaming at inanimate objects, a common sight in downtown Hamilton. A few business coats hurry across the street. But not me. I am frozen in place. Ah! I can't believe. No! Rock! Fucking rock. Stupid, stupid rock. Fuck! The man screams. He stops in front of me and pauses for a moment. Then he takes a step forward so that he is so close that I could smell his rancid breath against my face. "You look really beautiful today," he screams. Noticing a fire hydrant a few doors down, he rushes past me and begins to kick it. I stare in shock for a few moments before rounding the building towards my office complex. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys are both really good readers. I feel like I'm gonna have to go record my reading again. So when you were writing all three of these, like you chose to send them together, what do you feel like connected all three of these, or why do you feel like they almost come in as a bunch?
Well, I honestly I try to kind of match what some of the themes in Delane's work, but also they are all kind of grouped together by this common thread of addiction. So that's kind of why I felt that they work together.
Definitely, I got that. That was magical realism and now addiction, which is a subject I love.
Yeah.
On both, I don't know how you mix magical realism and addiction together, because I feel like with addiction, you might I don't know, you might almost have some mental issues that would kind of distract from the magical realism.
No, they work so well.
I think
You would think
so.
so.
I think it works if it's told not from a first person perspective, because then you feel like you're experiencing that I think in first person it'd be like you're just experiencing a high, but when it's happening removed from that character.
I would think they would work really, really well, but then I'm just thinking, like, once you give a reason for the magic, which could be delusions, then it breaks the magic.
In a way, yeah, because I think it's too much of a concrete reason. But with magic, you want it to be a little bit otherworldly. Yeah, yeah.
I have a piece from a while back where I used magical realism to talk about addiction, and like the main thing I found was that you focus on the feeling of addiction, not necessarily the drug itself. Like they could be addicted to something magic. Like that was kind of what I went with. But yeah, I just wanted to jump in with that.
Like it's thematically about addiction, but it's not literally about addiction. Right? Is that what you mean? Yeah. I did have a question, because these are like every time, or when I read them and then when you were reading them again, a really big feeling I get from them. So whenever I read a short story, like I think there's a bit of magic in figuring out like what's the key to the short story. Like you're kind of unfolding, you're trying to figure out, like, because you don't know nothing about it, and that's kind of the magic of short stories, is that it's just you're quick, you're jumping in and you're jumping into this world, and you're trying to figure out what is the rules of this world.
Right.
And I really enjoyed. That's what I don't read flash fiction very often. So it's really fun to read it, and you get these quick bursts of figuring out these stories. Like for example, when you had said a thickening white beard tickles his lower lip as it trembles in reflections, I started thinking, like, I know, and then he says, "When did that grow?" And then you get this like little clue of like, well, what's wrong with him that he doesn't even know when his beard grows.
Yeah.
Which I really, really thought was interesting. But I got a big sense or clue that almost everything is about addiction or disembodied. So I felt like everyone was like, you don't get a sense of the speaker's bodies at all.
Yeah, and you know, I personally I love flash fiction, and I do love it for all this it tends to be really ambiguous because you're only seeing a snapshot. You get very little context. So I think it's you either the type of reader that loves it or hates it. I find I have a middle with that, and that's what really attracts me to this genre, I guess. I actually just recently gave a lecture on flash fiction, so it's really like in the forefront of my mind. And in the lecture, in my notes, I had talked about how flash fiction, while requiring the typical elements of fiction like character and plot, it also like completely ignores them. So it's like giving it new rules. So it allows your writing to be like edgy and provocative in ways that may not work in your longer forms or other genres as well. So
Yeah, like starting a story with like an invasive male voice flooded the train car, and then it's like an external voice, but then you really get the sense of like I said, like not knowing the puzzle or rule, like what's this about.
yeah,
It's almost like there's no person who's experienced that, and you're like, why is it invasive? And invasive is such a good word there because you get this sense
yeah.
of like subjectivity, but you don't know whose subjectivity it is.
Right. And with these kind of stories, I have like a folder on my phone. I imagine you guys probably have something to this degree as well. Where every time somebody tells me a story or experience something, or somebody unexpectedly says something like profound in like a normal conversation, I tend to write it down and end up writing these little pieces about it. And I guess my fixation in the last couple of years has been addiction. And I think that's also like a key to being a writer. I'm going to say that very like loosely, but like having an obsession with something and just like returning to it over and over again and in different ways. So that's really just been my like personal exploration, especially with these short pieces.
Yeah, because I think there's like if you have an obsession, there's an infinite ways you can tackle that through a story.
Yeah.
Like there's no limit. You can just keep going back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a question about. Oh, sorry, Delane, you're gonna have a question? Shoot it
Yeah,
off.
I have a question. I like that in each story there was like both the sense that you're talking about how flash fiction has like its own like rules, but also lack thereof. I thought it was interesting that you have these like different world rules in each story where you start off with certain descriptions and we kind of get like a sense of what the like what this story is going to be. But then at the same time you have like you're almost using different rules of like the craft itself in each piece. So for example, in the second piece, Tuesday Train to Union Station, I noticed that it's very dialogue heavy, especially for the first bit. And I thought that was an interesting way to like use use writing rules in a different way, to have that heavy like dialogue without much like identifying the characters for like the first half until at the end we get like a little bit of a look at who they are, which kind of reflects to how the protagonists that we kind of towards the second half as well get a sense that, oh, like there is someone who is like listening in on this. It's kind of like she sees them at the same time we do. So I think it's very neat there. And I wanted to ask you about when you were going into those stories and creating them, did you have like an idea of like what kind of rules you would be using, or did it just kind of come naturally with the content?
I think for each one, there was something I was just personally wanting to explore in each one. So in the first one, in Reflections, it was a situation that I had experienced, and but I was obviously the person of like I was the observer, I was the girl, but and so everything that I described was what I saw, but I wanted to I'm very interested in what does a scene look like if you put yourself in the shoes of another person, especially when you're talking about a real circumstance. So for example, that's what I want to look at. How was this other person, how was Kurt seeing what I was experiencing? Same with in Tuesday Train to Union Station. I was again, these are very much based on some form of a reality, and just that moment of like when you do overhear a conversation and you don't necessarily see who's talking, you don't necessarily like know the subject, and you're just hearing this dialogue, and you're hearing something that is quite like heart-wrenching and sad, and then those feelings of, yeah, you're meeting your subject at the same time as your character, as you said, and growing your own assumptions from there. So there isn't like I didn't sit down with an intent to write it in a certain way, just based on like what I was interested in exploring or what had intrigued me.
Hmm. I thought it's interesting too that like your protagonist, as you mentioned, there are some like elements of it being like things that have happened like within your own memories and life. So I think it's interesting that the protagonist in all th three stories takes a little bit of a backseat to the people that they're witnessing, and so I thought that was another interesting link between all three of the pieces. I don't know if there's not really a question attached to that, just
That's okay.
observation.
Yeah. Do you have were you gonna talk, Ian?
I was going to say that's similar to like how I was saying that everything feels disembodied in it, which is really cool, and it's a really technique that I think you get away with in flash fiction, but it would be much harder in a longer narrative.
Yes, because with a longer narrative, you're like readers can only tolerate so much. So when you're writing like 300-400 words, like a flash fiction piece, yeah, people will tolerate it. They will you can string them along for that long. But when you get into like 1,500 words plus, there's a point where they're like, we need to know like who these people are, what's their relationship, all the regular things that come with fiction. So again,
I really like the idea of what you can get away with, because I was thinking about this for creating short stories. I really like weird or surreal short stories, but sometimes when you rely on like a unique idea, or like just something unique happens. So for like in the last story, like someone freezing, that's not a story, like an idea. The idea kind of carries this short story, but you can't do that for a novel, because now it's like you can't carry that idea for a whole novel because people will get sick of it.
Right,
So,
right.
so I like that level of, if you think of like flash fiction, short story, novel, it's like, what are people gonna get sick of? Like, how long can you keep this going for?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. How long can you trick your reader into tolerating what you have to say? Yeah.
Yeah. How like can you go like that's really cool and then it stops?
Yeah.
You don't go, okay, I'm over this cool thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I did have
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry. I think like with a novel, a way to work around that and sort of keep your readers on the hook is the multitude of different voices a novel is allowed to have versus a short story. Like you could have the disembodiment in a novel, but you'd have to be just jumping from character to character in this rotating roster of voices. Like it could be done, and it would be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, it'd be very hard to like keep people invested in not knowing something when they look at the book and they're like, oh great, I have 200 more pages of not knowing to get through.
Exactly. Yeah, when you're dealing with that amount of pages, it certainly is a different experience.
And I did have a question. It could be fielded to both of our lovely authors today. Both pieces seem to deal with encounters with the other, in like the sociological term, like other people who've been othered in society. Um, that's actually, I don't think I came up with a question for that comment, but I guess like how do you reckon with the other, like in writing? Like how do you, as writers writing about the others and potentially taking from real life scenarios, how do you balance that understanding of the other with making something that is, I suppose, marketable or enjoyable for consumption?
So that's a great question. I'm actually really bad at that, to be honest, because I'm that person who I'll like when I write a story, especially these little flash fiction pieces. When I'm talking about the other or even real people that I know or encounter, I always feel like I use their real names, and then if it's about me, I always change my name.
Oh no! Oh, of course, your name has to be changed.
So it's like I throw everyone under the bus but myself. But yeah, I feel like how to write about the other in a way that I guess that's respectful. And besides, I mean, not using the real names can be not respectful, of course. But I find with flash fiction or my writing is that taking that observational stance, I feel is a really safe space, because you're only discussing what you see, what you feel, what you experience, what your reaction to these situations are, rather than always trying to like write in what their experience is. Now, of course, in my first piece I read, Reflections, I do write from their perspective, but it is still very based off of my own observations rather than trying to write in their thoughts, feelings, or experiences as well. I don't know if you have another idea about this, Delane.
Yeah, sure. What kind of came to mind when Callum said the other is like Gothic narratives. I guess I studied a lot of Gothic narratives, so that's kind of always the first thing that comes to mind. And in a lot of Gothic works, when we're talking about this like other or like the thing unknown, it's usually like the thing that also provokes fear, or like a visceral emotional reaction. And I think that where that comes from ultimately is the fear of the unknown, and the other comes from a place of knowing and a place of familiarity, at least in my opinion, or like a place of preconceptions as well. So in the case of the other, like the stranger woman customer in my story, she's someone else, but she also is someone familiar, and that's where that kind of emotional turmoil comes from. Um, so how to deal with it, I suppose. Um, I just try to think of like, I guess my response when I come to things that are like unfamiliar, and like thinking about like what connections things have in real life and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe that was like too like philosophical. I don't know.
Eliza, I like your answer about I think let me sum it up like an earnestness. Like if you're just taking another like earnestly as if you're the character would, then it's not as much like a statement. It's more of an objective experience of another
Yeah,
or an other.
that's a better way of summing it up for sure.
All right. Do we have any last general thoughts or discussion points to wrap up, Callum?
I did have one more
One more?
question before my computer died and I had to switch locations. Both authors' pieces also, and you know, this might have been discussed while I was turning everything back on, but both seem to deal with conflict, interpersonal conflict. And I'm wondering, like, as you're writing a piece and as you're, you know, saying, okay, here's going to be some conflict. This is the conflict coming up. Do you know which way the conflict is going to go before you like finish the story? Like, do you know here is a conflict and this is how it's going to end up, or do you figure that out as the conflict is happening?
So I guess I'm a really weird writer. Um, so I would say, like, I often write just with like just general inspiration in mind. I don't really see that direction, and I actually I'm a really big hiker. So when I have an idea, I tend to go on a hike and I write sometimes whole stories in my head, like word for word, and then I'll go home and like put these on paper. And I'm a very like self-edit, like I self-edit in my head. Sometimes like if I'm stuck in a story, I'll just lie down, and like if you could reach that like lucid state, I could like fully continue writing a paragraph, or like and visualize the words and like edit things out. So I think that for like my writing process, not like just knowing the direction. It's very much like this like kind of lucid experience of just working through like different endings and different possibilities until I can like get something right in my head and put it on the paper. Hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, for me, I first want to comment on what Eliza said because I think it's like, really interesting to talk about like where inspiration comes from, which I will then try to tie back into conflict. For me too, like it's interesting that you mentioned like trying to find like that state where things are almost like manipulable in your mind. Because like for me, it's more like that's where my ideas come out. But then if I don't write them down immediately, like physically on something, they're like gone and the inspiration is lost forever. Like I can't continue to work on it in my brain. Otherwise, I'm like, well, now the story is over because I have thought the entire thing out. And I never want to touch it again. And like for some reason that's just like how I work, which is very much why I'm more of like a if you're going based on like plotzer versus pantser, I'm usually more of a pantser unless I literally like force myself to adhere to the plot because half the story's been written already and Delane, you have to finish that. But I'm very much like I'll start brainstorming in those, but as soon as the idea comes out, I'm like, okay, now it's on paper and I'm doing the rest like all like in my phone notes or like on paper. Um, but to talk about conflict again, um, similarly to Eliza, like I'll usually start off with more of like a mood or like scene sense of some kind. Um, and from there, the conflict will either come out or I'll have to sit on it for a while and then be like, okay, who's my character? What do they want? Like, how can I force a conflict out of this? Or like, where does it make sense for me to get a conflict? Because sometimes I'll get so tied down in like just a feeling that I want to create this feeling in the story that I didn't actually think of a story. I just thought of a scene or blip. Um, which sometimes is enough depending on what I want to be doing, but if I'm turning it into a full short story, it needs that conflict, it needs that tension. Um, Weirdly enough, for this like the piece I read today, that one, the conflict came pretty quickly. Like it kind of was already embedded in the plot, like the general idea I had, which was to talk about pieces of a past within a narrative, but not explaining the whole thing. So the conflict kind of just arose from that itself, as like an internal conflict. But that's actually one thing I've been struggling with on another piece I'm working on, which I talked with our lovely supervisor, Jeanette Lyons, today in a meeting, to kind of go over like where can I take this story? Like what is there underneath all of this that is actually like a connecting through line and like conflict thread. So I do find that usually the conflict is one of the last parts that I actually like fully flesh out and build into the story. I focus too much on like poetics and line edits at the beginning.
I do have one last question that I want to build on this question, but I've something I've been struggling with a lot lately. Um, Most of my stories are like idea oriented, so I get an idea, like a stupid idea, like a pan you can't cook eggs on, and I just like I have this idea, and then I just let the like I guess pantsing. I like George R. R. Martin's Architect vs. Gardener, but but I just write and I kind of just hammer the ending over and over and over until it feels right. But a lot of times I miss it. Like it doesn't work, or it just doesn't ever get to the ending that's satisfying or works. So if you're Delane and you're saying, and Eliza, you're saying you're both kind of pantsers, right? How do you end up at an ending that's satisfying, or you like when you start with more of like an idea or just like an inspiration?
How I end up at like I will walk and I will walk and I will walk and I'll just think and I will write notes on my phone until like I reach that resolution, and no matter how many kilometers it takes me to get there. Or so that's something that might work for you, some kind of task where you're just forced to be by yourself. Or I wrote the entire first draft for the novel I'm working on jet skiing at like 7 o'clock in the morning on at my mom's house. So all summer long, I'd go out and with my morning coffee, and I would ride around and just write in my head until I reached the end of the story and was happy with the ending. So I like it. That's my method, just doing random tasks. So maybe Delane has something that's more structured.
Aliza, I am picturing you on a jet ski with that outfit on right now.
You know, it flashed back to Thanksgiving. That was very much a reality because we just finished eating, and my mom's like, "Let's go, last jet ski of the year," and it was like weird, like coats and like hats and stuff out on the lake. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I feel like I need to take some more time sometimes to like actually just like sit with my thoughts and like do something that's like a little bit more like mindless, because like that is when like you start to really like start your imagination kind of comes out. Because I'll often be like, oh, I'll just listen to a podcast while I'm doing dishes or cleaning. But then like I'm never really like thinking. I'm just like listening to other things, which sometimes also brings inspiration, but at the same time, like you gotta actually like sit with your thoughts for a while to like get something going. Um, for conclusions, so a good portion of the time I will get either like someone who's like quite close to me to like read the like very very rough draft like before it's even finished. Like I'll get to the part where I'm like, okay, now I'm stuck and I don't know how I'm gonna finish my story, and like my partner will read it or something, and like maybe he'll say, well, it seems like it's heading in this direction, and then I'll be like, huh, yeah, yeah. But he also has like the mind of a screenwriter. Like he watches a lot of movies and really knows how to analyze a through thread of a plot through a movie, which can be quite similar sometimes to a plot of a short story, if it lengthwise. So because of that, like he has sometimes an eye for which direction the plot's going in, so that helps me a lot. I do the fancy word thing. He sometimes points me in the right direction. But otherwise, like for example, the piece I read today, that ending kind of just like I was like I couldn't possibly think of how to end it. I stopped around the part where it was like, and like we're doing the police reports and like blah blah blah, and I was like, how do I end this story? Like, what is it? I have no idea. Um, and I got my friend to read it, and she was also like, yeah, I have no idea. And I just kind of like, I was chatting with her about the story, and then suddenly I just went, wait a minute. And I like, because I thought back to, like I mentioned earlier, like seeing your own reflection and recognizing something about your past within that the reflection itself. And that's when it kind of like hit me, and I combined that with watching the thing on the TV, and I was like, TV reflection, and I was just like, oh, I got it. It all came together. And like I was like still on the call with my friend as I typed it out, and she read it and she was like, it's perfect. And I was like, it's perfect. And it took me like weeks, like maybe not weeks, that's probably an overexaggeration. Like it was probably like more like a week, like of just being like, I need to hand this in to my class, like just banging my head against the wall, like I don't know what I'm gonna do with this. And I had to like reread it over and over again to like try to get a sense of like where is this story going, like what would make sense for the protagonist in this moment, like what does she want from her, like from this experience, or what is she afraid of from this experience. And eventually, like it kind of hit me. So yeah, always think about what your character either wants or absolutely does not want, and I feel like that can kind of lead you towards your conflict and your ending eventually.
Yeah, there's that like distinction between wants and needs. So like the story is your wants, but then like the conclusion is fulfilling the need or not getting the need, which I really like.
Yeah, definitely.
And you guys both have reflections and mirrors in your stories as well.
That is
A
true.
friend and
Yeah.
someone staring at themselves. I think we can wrap her up there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for having me. I think Eliza, you're muted. I don't know if you're.
Well, Thank you. No, that was great.
Thank you, Delane and Aliza, for joining us on the River Volta podcast, and thank you to everyone listening at home. Keep an eye on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages for news on upcoming events like the River Volta Reading Series, which we live stream every month on Zoom, and our next episode of the River Volta podcast. So thank you so much, and so long.
Yeah, thank you, Delane, Aliza, and everyone watching.
Thank you.